In 2005 and 2006, the Environmental Protection Agency adopted 3 rules to regulate clean drinking water. The Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality has yet to meet those regulations. Under the threat of having its water regulation power taken away by the EPA, the DEQ is fighting to come up with the funds needed to get Oklahoma's water systems up to standards. I talked to StateImpact Oklahoma's Logan Layden about this developing story. Logan, Governor Fallin has indicated that she will include funds in her executive budget to fund DEQ. What prompted that?
Well, Oklahoma's just out of time, basically. The new rules from the EPA have been in place since 2005, 2006, and they've put a deadline of June 1st of this year for us to fund those regulations, or else they take over enforcement of the drinking water rules. So yeah, we're out of time. So
are there any indications where that money will come from?
I do not know yet. I haven't seen the actual budget. All I've seen is the letter from Governor Fallin's office to the DEQ talking about how they would include the needed funds in her executive budget that she sends to the legislature.
How much is actually needed and over what period of time?
$2 million are needed immediately, pretty much. Governor Fallin and DEQ are going to be asking for $1.5 million from the legislature. DEQ wants to get the other $500,000 through raising fees on water systems across the state.
It's early yet. The session hasn't begun. Are there any indications whether the legislature will choose to provide those funds?
There really aren't, but just looking at the situation with Oklahoma being out of time on this, Governor Fallin supporting the money, the DEQ doesn't want to have EPA take over, the EPA doesn't want to take over, and communities don't want the EPA to take over. So it seems like there's a pretty good chance.
What does Oklahoma actually have to do to prevent the federal takeover?
Well, basically just enforce these 3 new rules from the EPA, and they're very complicated. They have to do with the disinfectant that's used to clean water and making sure that that itself doesn't become a contaminant later on. Basically, they just need $2 million to do these checks and enforce these regulations. It just takes a little bit of money to make sure things like the systems that test the water are working properly and things like that.
Are there any efforts to try to prevent the takeover other than just coming up with the funding as required by DEQ?
No, that's really the main vehicle for keeping the EPA from taking over the drinking water regulations, is to enforce those 3 rules through extra money for DEQ. They've been going through cuts like most other agencies.
If the EPA takes over control in Oklahoma, then what would be the mechanism required for Oklahoma to regain that control at some point?
Well, from what I understand, they could come back and try again next session or the session after that, or really whenever, to properly fund the program, and then they would have primacy back, as they call it. We'd be back in control of our own drinking water.
You have been following this for a while. What's next up in your reporting?
Well, next up in the reporting, we're going to see whether or not this gets passed in the legislature, whether or not the legislature agrees with the governor that this is a high priority. That's really the next step for this story.
And for the state.
Yes.
Logan Layden from StateImpact Oklahoma, thank you.
Thank you.